Hello, Antioch. I pray you're having a blessed week. It is my task and opportunity to share with you this week's devotion. And this week's devotion is called Lessons Learned at Life's Bitter Pools. Lessons Learned at Life's Bitter Pools. And it's coming from Exodus chapter 15, verses 22 through 27. And it reads, So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Now, when they had come to Marah, they could not drink the waters of Marah for they were bitter. Therefore, the name of it was called Marah, which in Hebrew actually means bitter. Verse 24, and the people complained against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? Verse 25, so he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. When he had cast it into the waters were made sweet. There he made a statute and an ordinance for them, and he tested them, he being God, and said, If you diligently heed my voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his sight, give ear to his commandments, and keep his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have brought on the Egyptians. For I am the Lord who heals you. It's where we get the phrase Jehovah Rapha. It actually means the Lord who heals, or God our healer. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees. So they camped there by the waters. Today we're going to talk about lessons Antioch learned at life's bitter pools. And I want to focus on the last lesson because I think it's most important. And I want to peruse through the first two lessons, first 2 points, because I think the last lesson is the point we need to focus on the most here during this time of quarantine and through what not only our country is going through, but what's happening all around the world. So point number one, they learned some lessons about life. That's point number one. We have 3 points to the point number one. You guys know how I like to do it because I like to be very thorough. They learned that life is a mixture, and that's very true. Life is a mixture of both good and bad. Ask my boy Job, ask Joseph, ask many Bible characters. Life is a mixture. It is a mixture of both blessings and bitterness. Point B is that life has a master. Get this, you will learn as you live life that life has a master, that there is a God who is in control. Get this, they actually just experienced God's power by the plagues that God brought up on the Egyptians, and they actually saw God actually defeat the world's greatest army, the Egyptian army, through the Red Sea experience. And then they come to this place and they're complaining. But get this, life has a master. How often do we forget, like the disciples in John chapter 6, are reminded of how the disciples saw Jesus feed 5,000. It was probably 20 if you add the women and children. And then yet they get on the boat and they're struggling. They think they're about to die. And Jesus comes to the sea and they say, Who is this man? Even the winds and the waves obey him. It's pretty amazing that they just forgot the fact that he fed 20,000 people with some fish and some loaves of bread. It's amazing how we forget how good God is. I want to encourage you and y'all to think about where God has brought you from and where he's bringing you to. And even through the midst of this trying time, God still has a plan. But also, under point number one, letter C, life has a ministry. God uses both the good and the bad to minister to the Israelites. Every situation in life serves as a ministry of our Lord to us to make us like him. That's God's ultimate goal, is to make us like him. So get this, they learned some lessons about life. Not only they learn lessons about life, point number two, they learn lessons about themselves. Under letter A up on the point number two, they learned that they were living for themselves. They only cared about their bodily satisfaction. Get this, they had seen God move in a miraculous way 3 days before, and all they could care about was getting some water to drink. It's amazing how we forget about God's power, his majesty, and how things that he does for us so quickly, and then we begin to complain. So they were actually living for themselves. Letter B under point number two, we see that they were walking by sight. They were looking for satisfaction in the world around them. Get this, they were in the desert. Ain't too much satisfaction in the desert. There's not a whole lot of life in the desert. And they were looking for the satisfaction, and they were walking by sight in the desert, and they wanted water in their desert. And I'm pretty encouraged about how God used this to minister. But also, lastly, the things that they learned about themselves and letter C is that they were never, ever satisfied. Like I said before, 3 days earlier, God had delivered them from slavery. They were slaves 3 days earlier, and now they're free men and women and children, and yet they complain. When we're on the mountaintop, we can be so quickly to praise and glorify God and put our hands up. But when we go through struggles, when trial comes our way, we begin to gripe and complain and cry. We're never satisfied. God talks about how contentment is a godly attribute, and I pray that you would have that. But I want to focus on the last point, and it's this: not only did they learn something about life, not only did they learn some stuff about themselves, but most importantly, they learned lessons about who God was. They learned lessons about who God was. Get this, letter A up on the point number 3. He is aware of our needs. Get this, God knew what they would face at Marah. He himself had planned it, because God is a God who's omniscient. He knows all things. He has a path and a plan for your life. And as he did for Israel, nothing takes God by surprise. Get this, God is already in tomorrow, and he knows what you will face when you get there. If you don't believe me, just read Matthew 6:32. He says tomorrow has its own issues. He knows what they are, and he knows how he's going to solve them. And he knows what he's going to do. So they learned that he was well aware of their needs. But not only that, letter B, that he was able to meet their needs. Get this, he was able to meet their need. He told Moses to go and cut down this tree and cast it into the waters. And for you seminarians out there, you understand this principle there, that this is actually a typology or foreshadowing of the cross. How he threw this wood, this tree, into the waters, and waters that were bitter actually became sweet. And I love this, because when you put Jesus, when you put the cross, when you put the gospel in anything, it turns that thing from bitterness to sweet. If you want to have a great marriage, put Jesus in it. It'll make your marriage sweet. If you want to have a great life, Jesus says, I come to give you the abundant life. That don't mean you have abundance of things, but that means you have abundance of joy, peace, and his presence living inside of you, and it will make your life sweet. He's able to meet your needs. God knows them before you even know them. He has placed them there. He's placed your wants and your desires there, and to supply your needs before you even know they exist. But lastly, in point C, he's already provided for our needs. And this is the point that actually encouraged me the most, as God revealed this to me in scripture. Years before Israel even arrived there at Marah, God caused a seed to fall in the ground and to germinate in the very place they would need it. He looked ahead and prepared the way for their need. Get this, probably some 60, 70 years before they even get to this place, he caused a seed to drop in the ground and grow. This very tree that he was going to use as a typology of the gospel. He caused this seed to grow, because he knew one day he was going to deliver a people, and they were going to cross the desert for 3 days, and they were going to complain, and they were going to complain to their leader Moses. And God used this very seed to grow over years and time, because his provision was already there. Get this, God already has our needs there. Do you realize that your need, as frightening as it may be, is only the evidence of God's supply in waiting? I want to say that again. Do you realize that your need, as frightening as it may be, is only the evidence of God's supply in waiting? You'll never face a need in life that God has not already met. Let that sink in. It should totally destroy fear, worry, and anxiety that, you know what, our God has our back. In closing, I want to encourage you with this, because this is one of the things that I've been trying to counsel people through over the last couple of weeks with this coronavirus situation. Many people were coming to me and say, Chap or Pastor Jay, why is God allowing this to happen? And I think it's an amazing time. I'm pretty excited about what God is going to do. I'm not excited about people losing their lives and people being sick. Uh, and there's a paradox inside of me, but I'm excited about how God's going to reveal himself. And I want you to understand this. God only reveals his character in times of suffering. Let's unpack it a little bit more. God reveals his character in times of suffering because, get this, we would never know Jehovah Shammah, the Lord our peace, unless we had calamity going on around us. We would never know God here as Jehovah Rapha, Lord our healer, if we were not sick. We would never know God as our shepherd, Jehovah Ra'ah, the Lord our shepherd, if we didn't lose our, if we weren't lost and have lost our way. We would never know Lord as our banner and the one who fights for us if we couldn't fight for ourselves. Get this, God's character and his nature is always on front and center stage when the situations look the bleakest. Have you ever thought about it? Job would have never known God to be a restorer unless he lost everything. Lazarus was never knew the preciousness and the gift of life until he lost his. Mary and Martha wouldn't have known Jesus as the resurrection and the life if Lazarus wouldn't have died. Get this, even in these bleak circumstances, God is revealing who he is to us. So be encouraged, Antioch. God is aware of our needs. He's able to meet our needs, and he's already provided for our needs. So my encouragement to you is to trust him. Focus and fix your eyes on him, and don't complain. Don't complain. Trust God because he's already have our need met, and he already has a supply there waiting on us for us. So, Antioch, we love you. We thank you. We're thankful for you. God bless you. Have a great week.